then Rivian, Dean of the Library, and I'm happy to welcome you to Barb and Tina's excellent intelligent design adventure with Darwin and Hume. And I just want to give you a sense of where this came from, actually, because it started back in December 2005 when I got an email from a group called Darwin Day Celebration saying that Darwin's 200th birthday would be celebrated on February 12, 2009, and suggesting that libraries and universities and museums organize events to celebrate Darwin's birthday as we approach the bicentennial. And at that time, the Natural Museum, Museum of Natural History in New York City was running a Darwin exhibition, and Russell Burke from biology, Brett Bennington from geology, and I went down to take a look. And after walking through it, we decided that we would use Darwin's letters and journals to stage some of the major events in his life as a dramatic play. And we'd get students to play the parts of Darwin's friends, and Brett would dress up as Darwin. And it would just be it would just be kind of fun. And at our first birthday party in February 2006, we had 200 students and faculty who came to eat cake and ice cream with us and celebrate it. Next year, 2007, we did a Valentine's Day tribute to Darwin, Evolution and Sex. That was well attended. And then in 2008, we had a show celebrating the trip that the Hofstra students take to the Galapagos Islands to kind of retrace Darwin's footsteps a little bit on the voyage he took on the Beagle. And then in March 2009, we held a big 3-day international conference called Darwin's Reach, a celebration of Darwin's legacy across academic disciplines, stressing the interdisciplinary nature of what we were all doing and what our interest in Darwin was. I think we kind of took a break in 2010, and then when we started planning this party for 2011, the philosophy department decided to take over the event and to join the biologists and geologists and use the event to celebrate the 300th anniversary of the Scottish philosopher David Hume. Hume actually had anticipated a lot of this discussion in modern times about intelligent design, and he anticipated it and critiqued it almost 100 years before Darwin published On Origin of the Species. So I think, as Ira says, Hume opened the door that Darwin walked through. You've probably heard that phrase in some of your classes, and that's kind of what we're celebrating today. So we figured it would be fun if we could just get Darwin and Hume in the same room together to talk to each other, and also bring in some of the participants in the contemporary debate about intelligent design, some of the people who spoke at the Dover trial a couple years ago. So Brett suggested that we set this in the fictional frame of the 1989 movie Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. I realize that movie probably was came out before some of you were born, but it's historical. Get in touch, find out what's been going on. So, welcoming you. There are scripts of this, by the way, in the back if you want to pick them out. On your way out. Some of you already got them. Okay, fine. And so I think all I need to do now is introduce Barb and Tina.
Wow, I'm really digging this evolution course. It's got mad ideas to ponder.
Indeed, this course totally rocks. But I'm most troubled after our discussion today about intelligent design theory.
Do tell, Tina, what is it that vexes you so?
Well, I just don't get why scientists can't accept the possibility that life had a greater design. I mean, when you think about it, it seems so impossible that all of the biomolecules and structures that make life work just happen to come together. Cells are so intricate and they function so well, like tiny little machines. At some point way back, somebody must have put all the pieces together. How can they just self-assemble?
Girl, I totally get what you're saying. I too am puzzled over this. Every part of the cell has a purpose and the function of the most harmonious whole. Dare I say that purpose is the hallmark of living things? Bees function to pollinate flowers, earthworms function to aerate the soil, predators function to keep prey in check, or eyes. Girl, don't get me started on my eyes. They're totally awesome with little 3D cameras. How do eyes just happen?
Too true. Eyes are righteously designed to carry out their functions, like checking out hotties.
But who would be the designer? Are we talking about the big guy?
Dude, maybe it was E.T. or a bioengineer from the future.
Whoa, temporal paradox. Focus.
Well, whoever or whatever the designer was, you at least have to accept the possibility of it. How else do you explain purposeful design in living things?
Well, I'm pretty sure Darwin explained it scientifically. I just don't quite understand how.
Hey, we should totally ask him.
Forward to the past. Mr. Darwin! Excuse us, good sir, but my friend and I have the most pressing question to ask of you.
Good day, young ladies. How may I be of service to you both?
We were hoping you could enlighten us as to the source of the apparent design of living things. Is design proof of the existence of a creator, or does design have a material explanation?
Ah, yes. What you call design is also referred to as final cause, the purposefulness of species and their organic contrivances. The Reverend William Paley made an analogy between living things and a pocket watch. If you come across a pocket watch lying on the ground, you infer there must have existed a designer who made the watch for the purpose of keeping time. Someone who comprehended its construction and designed its use. Every manifestation of design that exists in the watch exists in living organisms, at least according to the good Reverend.
So this Reverend Paley was the first dude to prove that living things must have had a designer.
Well, not so fast, my oddly dressed young friend. The argument from design has a long history. Why, just the other day I was reading dialogues concerning natural religion by the philosopher David Hume. If I understood him correctly, Mr. Hume offered up a criticism of the argument from design almost 100 years ago. I just wish I could recall it well enough to do it justice. It was rather densely written.
Don't worry, Darwin, dude. We can get the answer straight from Hume's mouth. Charles Darwin, meet David Hume.
An honor, Mr. Hume.
At your service, sir.
So philosopher dude, do you not agree that the purposefulness and complex structure of living things implies the existence of a result designer?
Not so fast, strangely dressed Missy. In my dialogues concerning natural religion, my characters argue the case for God as the designer of the natural world from several points of view. Perhaps we should let my Cleanthes and Philo speak for themselves.
Philo, look around the world. Contemplate the whole and every part of it. You'll find it to be nothing but one great machine, subdivided into an infinite number of lesser machines, which themselves can be subdivided to a degree beyond what human senses and faculties can trace and explain. The curious adaptations of means to end throughout all nature resembles exactly, though it much exceeds, the productions of human contrivance, of human designs, thought, wisdom, and intelligence. Since therefore the effects resemble each other, we are led to infer by all the rules of analogy that the causes also resemble, and that the author of nature is somewhat similar to the mind of man, though possessed of much larger faculties, proportioned to the grandeur of the work which he has executed.
If we see a house Cleanthes, we conclude with the greatest certainty that it had an architect or a builder, because this is precisely the kind of effect we've experienced for that kind of cause. But surely you won't affirm that the universe bears such a resemblance to a house that we can with the same certainty infer a similar cause, or that the analogy is perfect. The dissimilarity is so striking that the most you can hear pretend to is a guess, a conjecture, a presumption concerning the similar cause.
Oh, but Philo, is there really so little similarity between a house's relationship to its builder and the universe's relationship to its cause? Steps of a stair are plainly constructed so that human legs may use them in climbing, and this inference is certain and infallible. Human legs are also constructed for walking and climbing, although this inference I allow is not altogether so certain because of the dissimilarity which you remark. But does it therefore deserve the name only of presumption or conjecture?
But Cleanthes, did you lose your calm rationality when you compared the universe with houses, ships, furniture, and machines? When you inferred from their similarity in some circumstances, a similarity in their causes? Thought, design, intelligence, such as we discover in men or other animals, is no more than one of the springs and principles of the universe, along with heat and cold, attraction and repulsion, and 100 others which fall under daily observation. What peculiar privilege has this little agitation of the brain we call thought, that we must make it the model of the whole universe?
Well, just consider the anatomy of the eye, survey its structure and contrivance, and tell me, from your own feeling, if the idea of a contrivance does not immediately flow in upon you with a force like that of something you see right in front of you. The most obvious conclusion, surely, is in favor of design.
How then should we understand the cause of that being, whom you suppose to be the author of nature? Have we not the same reason to trace its cause to some further cause or intelligent principle? But if we stop, and go no further, why go so far? Searching for causes, why not stop at the material world? How can we satisfy ourselves without going on infinitely? If our material world rests upon some earlier cause, that cause must rest upon some other. And so on, without end. It's better, therefore, never to look beyond the present material world. When you go one step beyond this straightforward answer, you only create a question that's impossible ever to answer. A tree bestows order and organization on new trees that grow from its seeds without knowing an order. An animal in the same manner on its offspring, and a bird its nest. Examples of this kind are even more common in the world than examples of order arising from reason and contrivance. To say that all this order in animals and vegetables derives ultimately from design is begging the question. Nor can your point be proven without proving both that order is always the product of thought and that it can never be the product of matter alone.
So be it, Philo. But one great advantage of theism is that it is the only understanding of the universe which can be made intelligible and complete, and yet can at the same time preserve a strong analogy to what we every day see and experience in the world. The comparison of the universe to a machine made by humans is so obvious and natural, and is justified by so many instances of order and design in nature, that it must immediately strike every unprejudiced person's understanding and earn the approval of everyone. Whoever attempts to weaken this theory of an intelligent designer cannot pretend to succeed by placing it with another theory that is as precise and determinate. There is no such theory.
Touché, Mr. Hume. If I capture meaning, drawing an analogy between a human artifact like a pocket watch and a natural object like a butterfly, is not enough to prove they came from the same cause.
Precisely. In fact, a watch and a living thing are really quite different, made from different materials and functioning according to different mechanisms. Both are intricate in structure and both function for a purpose, but these similarities alone do not prove a common cause.
Okay, I totally concede that point, but Cleanthes scores when he states that an intelligent designer makes their understanding of the natural world intelligible and complete. Why not accept God as a designer of living things? What other explanation is there that can account for butterflies, and all other examples of
as Philo points out, from a philosophical perspective, positing God as the creator of the natural world doesn't solve the question of origins, it only displaces it.
Oh, right. As in, who created God? And then who created the creator of God? And who created the creator of the creator of God? And who created the...
Yes, we get your meaning. If all complexity requires an intelligent designer, and the intelligent designer of this complex material world is himself complex, then we are embarked on an infinite regress of explanations. Better to stop, if we can, with the material world. If we can account for material complexity with material causes, we need look no further.
But how can unintelligent material causes create all the complexity we see in living things? I remain most unconvinced.
And, well, you should be unconvinced, my skeptical lass, for I have no alternative explanation to offer you. I cannot begin to explain how complex living beings come into existence through the operation of material causes. I can only point out the philosophical problems inherent in postulating an intelligent designer. I have no alternative.
But I believe that I have worked out an alternative explanation that relies only on the facts and principles of living beings observed in nature. I came upon the idea studying the production of different varieties of domesticated animals and crops through the action of selective breeding. Can the principle of selection, which we have seen is so potent in the hands of man, apply in nature? I think that it can most efficiently.
But intelligent humans are doing the selecting when breeding pigs and goats or new varieties of corn. Who's doing the selecting in nature?
Well, think about how variable offspring are. No two siblings are ever exactly alike, and how strong hereditary tendency is. Seeing that variations useful to man have undoubtedly occurred in crops and domesticated animals, it is not hard to imagine that other variations useful to organisms in the great and complex battle of life should sometimes occur in the course of thousands of generations. Remember, many more individuals are born than can possibly survive. If such useful variations do occur, can we doubt that the individuals having any advantage, however slight, over others would have the best chance of surviving and procreating their kind? On the other hand, we may feel sure that any variation in the least degree harmful would be rigidly destroyed in the struggle for existence. This preservation of favorable variations and the rejection of injurious variations I call natural selection.
Okay, I totally get it. Everything is doing the selecting. Anything that has an impact on organism survival and reproduction affects the appearance of the next generation.
Precisely. It may be said that natural selection is daily and hourly scrutinizing throughout the world every variation in the slightest. Natural selection rejects that which is bad, but preserves and adds up that which is good. It is silently and insensibly working, whenever and wherever opportunity offers, at the improvement of each organic being in relation to its organic and inorganic conditions of life. We see nothing of these slow changes in progress until the hand of time has marked the long lapse of ages.
Not so fast, Darwin dude. How can undirected, unintelligent natural selection produce something as mad complex as the human eye?
Well, I freely confess that to suppose that the eye, with all its intricate contrivances for seeing, could have been formed by natural selection seems absurd in the highest degree. However, reason tells me that if numerous gradations from a simple and imperfect eye to one complex and perfect can be shown to exist in different animals, each grade being useful to any animal under changing conditions of life, then it is reasonable to admit that a perfect and complex eye could be formed by natural selection.
But the human eye just seems so perfect, like a finely crafted camera or telescope.
It is scarcely possible to avoid comparing the eye with a telescope. We know that this instrument has been perfected by the long-continued efforts of the highest human intellects. And we naturally infer that the eye has been formed by a somewhat analogous process. But may not this inference be presumptuous? Have we any right to assume that the Creator works by intellectual powers like those of man? To imagine the evolution of the eye, we need only start with a thick layer of transparent tissue with spaces filled with fluid, and with a nerve sensitive to light beneath. We then suppose every part of this structure to be continuously varying in shape, thickness, and density. Further, we must suppose that there is a power called natural selection, or the survival of the fittest, always intently watching each slight variation and carefully preserving those which tend to produce a more distinct image. We must suppose each new state of the instrument to be multiplied by the millions, each to be preserved until a better one is produced, and then the old ones to all be destroyed. Let this process go on for millions of years, and during each year on millions of individuals of many kinds. Could not a living optical instrument thus be formed, superior to one of glass made by the intellect of man?
Come on, Tina. You gotta admit that it's at least possible.
Okay, maybe for the eye, but what about more complex things?
Well, if it could be demonstrated that any complex organ existed, which could not possibly have been formed by numerous successive slight modifications, my theory would absolutely break down. But I can find no such case.
Hey, what about that flagellar motor thingy that those dudes were arguing about in the documentary we saw in class?
Oh yeah, that was the film about the trial in Dover, Pennsylvania, over whether or not intelligent design theory could be taught at science in school. One biology dude was like, the flagellum can't be evolved, it's totally too complex. And the other biology dude was like, nuh-uh, the flagellum could totally be evolved.
Something called the bacterial flagellum. The bacterial flagellum is quite literally an outboard motor that bacteria use to swim. And in order to accomplish that function, it has a number of parts ordered to that effect. One part here, the filament, is actually the propeller of the bacterial flagellum. The motor is actually a rotary motor. It spins around and around, and as it spins the propeller, which pushes against the liquid in which the bacterium finds itself, and therefore pushes the bacterium forward through the liquid. The drive shaft attached to the motor itself produces a flow of acid from outside the cell to the inside of the cell to power the turning of the motor, much like, say, water flowing over a dam can turn a turbine. The drive shaft has to transverse the membrane of the cell, and there are protein parts which act as what are called bushing materials to allow the drive shaft to proceed through. And it's really much more complex than this. But I think this illustration gets across the point of the purposeful arrangement of parts. Most people who see this and have the function explained to them quickly realize that these parts are ordered for a purpose, and therefore bespeak design. We infer design, and see the parts appear to be arranged for a purpose. The strength of the purpose of the inference is quantitative. The more parts that are arranged, and the more intricately they interact, the stronger is our confidence in design.
Dr. Behe has made very clear what I think is fairly called his biochemical argument for design. This argument depends on a much bolder claim than simply saying that scientists have not yet explained how the flagellum has evolved. The reason Dr. Behe says that evolution cannot explain the origin of complex structures like the flagellum is because they have a special property, a property that he calls irreducible complexity. His argument is that if you have a multi-part system, and all the parts of that system are necessary for function, then you can't evolve that system one part at a time and gradually build the complex system, because no function at all is possible until the last part itself is snapped into place. Therefore, if he's correct, we should be able to take the bacterial flagellum apart and its parts, break down the parts, and discover that none of these parts are good for anything except when they're all assembled in the flagellum. Evolutionary theory holds, however, that instead, when we look at these complex structures, we ought to be able to find parts in those systems that actually do have useful functions within them. So if he's correct, if we take away just one part, there should no longer be any function. But I'm going to propose that we do better than that we take not one, not two, but 30 parts away. I'm going to propose we take 30 of these proteins away and see what's left. The parts that I have removed are on the outside and on the inside, and what are left are 10 proteins that span the inner and outer membrane. Well, it turns out that what's left behind with just those 10 remaining proteins is a little structure known to microbiologists as the type 3 secretory system. It's very clear that a subset of those proteins has an entirely different function, a beneficial function for the bacterium, and a function that can and is favored by natural selection. So instead, when we take apart a complex multi-part system such as the bacterial flagellum, the prediction made by Dr. Behe from irreducible complexity is that we should have no longer any useful functions. An irreducibly complex structure missing a part is, by definition, non-functional. We follow that up. We do break it apart. And lo and behold, we do find a variety of useful functions, one of which I have just pointed out is the type 3 secretion. And what that means in ordinary scientific terms is that the argument that Dr. Behe has made is falsified. It's wrong, and it's time to go back to the drawing board.
I can't believe that in spite of Darwin's theory of evolution, by natural selection, the design argument is still alive and kicking.
And most righteously so. I find it totally compelling. The closer you look at living organisms, the more they look like they are made of tiny machines. You have to at least admit the possibility that the hand of a designer was at work at some point in the past. Maybe evolution won't be able to explain everything about living cells.
I had hoped that natural selection would at least convince my colleagues in the natural sciences that there is a way to arrive at design without an intelligent designer. But as I might have guessed, it appears that not all are convinced by my reasoning.
Spare not, Darwin, dude. 150 years after your weighty tome on the origin of species, natural selection is almost universally accepted as the only scientific explanation for the appearance of design in living things. You have much to be proud of.
But it seems that even after 250 years, the appearance of design or the desire to see the handiwork of the Almighty in living things is strong enough to keep the debate alive, perhaps for another 250 years.
Question? Comment? There'll be a quiz.
There won't be a quiz, but there will be cake and ice cream.
No. Should we sing? We should sing Happy Birthday.
Yes. Yes.
You want to start?
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Charles Darwin. Happy birthday to you.
Cake and ice cream.